All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar. Teri Czinn for dedicating all the Sherman Roshos this month in memory of Dr. Kahn, Tzvi Hirsh, ben Yosef HaKohen. To thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Sherman Roshos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah ben Zechariah and Dinah bas Pesach. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Avi and Vivianne Zysman, creation of the yahrzeit of Avi's father, Michael Zysman, Michael ben Yechiel, Zichron Livracha. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Nathan and Beth Adler, and creation of the first yahrzeit of Judy Goldman, Yehudis Esther bas Elozer. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah and the families Ein Nechama. And also with that, let us begin a really interesting daf ahead of us today. So we are picking up Rabosai on the bottom of today's daf is Nun Aleph 51, and we are picking up at Meretz Hashem on 50 Amud Beis, right? 50b, right? Nun Amud Beis, and we are picking up at the two dots, which are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, we ended off yesterday's daf. If we have time, I'll come back to it today because it was actually I'll just tell it to you right now. Remember again, we ran out of time yesterday, but we were speaking about the concept of nitzuk, the concept of a stream connecting the contents of two utensils, specifically the case of pouring from a tahar utensil into a tameh utensil, and ultimately, again, does that stream connect the contents of the two utensils? So we actually said in normal circumstances, the answer to that is no. Nitzuk does not connect. The Gemara did introduce us to two concepts, namely smuchin, ultimately again thicker liquids, or what we'll call ririn. Ririn. All right, ultimately again like the strands that jump back. So that seems to be a machlokes. Ultimately again, if one or both of those liquids go ahead and create a connection. So I just wanted to close it out that Rambam Paskins in Hilchos Tumas Uchlin. Perek Zayin Halacha Dalid. Nichil Dvash Hazifim Udvash Hatzapachas. So he actually quotes the two examples the Gemara brings down. Right? Zifim, honey, and Otzapachas, which was that thicker porridge. Hanitzok Shalahen Chibor. Their stream actually is a connection. Why? Mipnei Shehen Yesh Lahen Rir Veim Nimshachen Kedebek. The Rambam says, in order to create nitzuk, actually, you need both of the criteria. Namely, the liquid has to be thick, and there has to be ririn hachosrin. Ultimately, again, the strands that spring back when you stop the flow. If you have both of those criteria are met, then under those circumstances, there will be a halachic connection that is made between the contents of the tar utensil and the tameh utensil through the flow of contents one to the other. Incredible. So also with that, let us go weiter. So we are picking up in Meretz Hashem at the two dots. Va'al moli tarvad reket. So also remember again, this is the Mishnah said. Remember the Mishnah went through the list of items that make a Nazir tameh. Exposure to items which make a Nazir tameh. So one of the examples was a ladle full of corpse dust. All right. So the Gemara says v'kama shiura. By the way, how much is a ladle full? Right. So it sounds like a lot, but interestingly enough, Chizkiya Amar Milo Pisas Hayad. It's a palm full. What you could fit in the palm of your hands. That's called a ladleful. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Milo Chafnav. Rabbi Yochanan says it refers to a handful. They're both saying now, what's the difference between a palm full and a handful? If you take a look at Rashi on the left-hand side, 4 lines down from the bottom, Milo Pisas Yad, below etzbos. We'll say a palm full is literally, again, the amount that you could contain in the palm of your hand without what? Without closing your hand. So in other words, you don't have the benefit of cupping your fingers around the contents. So it's whatever you can fit in the palm, that's it. Versus below chafnav, what we call a handful, is bahade etzpa'osav, includes the fingers. So in other words, it would be the amount that you could contain if you were to cup your hand. Okay, so tonight we learned Molei Tavad Rakev, when we speak about again the amount of corpse dust that makes a Nazir Tameh, Shamru, Yeshnon Me'ikar Etzba'osav Ulamala Div Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, listen to this, right? Meir says it's the amount from the knuckles up until the tips of the fingers. The Chum say, Melo Chafna. The Chum say, no, it's a handful. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, who Damar Kirabanon, so we'll say, so I understand, look, Rabbi Yochanan holds like the Rabbanon, right? Because Rabbi Yochanan says a handful. The Chum say a handful. El Chizkiya Kiman. But also when Chizkiya says a palm full, so he doesn't seem to align with either of the two opinions, either the Chamim or Rabbi Meir. So Kiman, lo Rabbi Meir, v'lo Rabbanon. So listen to this. Amri, Malay Pisas Hayad, Umalay Kishrei Litzba'osav, Lemala Chachura. So we'd have to say that ultimately again, Chizkiya's palm full, and ultimately again, Chizkiya's palm full, and Rabbi Meir's Me'ikr Etzba'osav is in fact the same shear. It's the same amount. So the palm full ultimately again from the fingers is going to be the same amount. So the Gemara says, right, so Malo Plisas Hayad, Umale Kishrei Etzba'osav, Lemala Chad Shi'uru. So the palm full and the amount from the fingers upwards is one shear. So the Gemara says, who Amr Le Rav Simi Ba'adla Baba, Mimai Dahai Mikishrei Etzba'osav, Lemala L'Rosh, Dilma Lemata Midide, Tahavele Male Pisas Hayad. So I'll say, so furthermore again, how do you know that ultimately again, when it says Kishrei Etzba'osav Ulemala, how do you know ultimately again that means from the knuckles up to the top of the fingers? Maybe it means ultimately again, Dilma Lamata Mididei, maybe it means below, to the Havile Male Pisas Hayad, which would then be the same shear as the palm full, to which the Gemara says, Teku. Okay, Teku. So also I just point out to you, Rambam Paskin's halacha l'maisa like Rabbi Yochanan, namely again that the amount of what when the Mishnah says a ladle full of corpse dust, the Rambam Paskins that is melo chafnav, that is a handful. And I will say, what's the definition of a handful? Definition of a handful is the amount that you can contain in your palm, and again cupping your hand, so with the benefit of the fingers as well. That amount of corpse dust or exposure to that amount of corpse dust ultimately again will make the Nazir tummy. Incredible. Both say top of Nun Aleph. See, here we come to a very interesting halakha, still regarding corpse dust. That you'd be surprised how much there is to talk about regarding corpse dust. So the Gemara says this: Tanabanon, Eizuhu meis sheyesh lo rekev. So we'll say when we speak about corpse dust having the ability to go ahead and make a Nazir tummy, what type of corpse dust are we referring to? Listen to this. See, sheyesh lo rekev meis shenikbar arum ba'aron shal shayish. We're talking about a corpse that was buried without clothing in a casket of marble, or al gabe ritzpa shalavanim, or the corpse itself was just placed on a floor of stones. Zehu meis sheyesh lo rekev. This is a mace, ultimately again, that is subject to the din of corpse dust. Now we'll say, now what's the chap over here? Let's read the next line, then we'll understand it. Conversely, nikbar biksuso, if the corpse was buried in its clothing, or ba'aron shal eitz, or in a wooden casket, or agabe ritzpa shalavenim, or on a brick floor, zehu meis she'ein lo rekev. This is a corpse that is not subject to the laws of corpse dust. Why the distinction? So I will say, if you take a look at the rush for just a moment, so here I know we're all on the same pagination of the rush, because this is the first rush on the page. Ezu meis sheish lo rekev, shemalei tarvad me afar, mitame ba'oel. So we'll say, what's the type of corpse dust that has the ability to convey tumah? Nikbar ba'aron shal shayish, shlonis ariv rikavon acher ba'afro. So we'll say, the din over here is like this. Corpse dust is only mitame if it's pure corpse dust. From the corpse, no additives or preservatives. In other words, we'll say, so it's just got to be corpse dust by itself. So what that means is, if the body was buried in other things which decompose, and therefore that means that other materials are mixed in with the corpse dust, the corpse dust is not mitame. So we'll say, so now I understand the two cases. In case number one, right, you have a corpse buried without clothing, so there's no clothing disintegration. It's buried in a casket of marble, right? Marble doesn't disintegrate, or on a floor of stones, stone doesn't disintegrate. So the idea over here is that when you have corpse dust, that is pure, unadulterated corpse dust. Contrast that with the second case. You have a body buried in clothing disintegrates, or a wooden casket, wood disintegrates, or brick floor, bricks disintegrate, which means that when you have that corpse dust, guess what? You have other items mixed in there. There are other additives. And once there are other additives, ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa, the corpse dust is not matame. And both sides, this is, remember, we're assuming over here that the din of corpse dust is a halacha l'moshe misinai. Again, we'll talk about this more, but that is the nature of the halacha l'moshe misinai, namely, that now we know it's a handful of corpse dust, has the ability to convey tumah, but only if it is pure, unadulterated corpse dust, not mixed with any other items which decomposed alongside the corpse. Incredible. That's the halacha. That's the halacha. So the Gemara says over here, fine. Amar Ula. Ula says as follows. What's another qualification? Ein rekev, ela haba min ha-basar, o min ha-gidim, o min ha-atzamos. Furthermore, Ula comes along and says that halacha l'maisa is only called corpse dust if it contains the remains of flesh, bone, and sinews. In other words, Rabbi say, so corpse dust has to be the composite remains ultimately of all parts of the body. So for example, I will say, if you know that you have a piece of decomposed flesh, right, that did not have bone, then halacha l'maisa, that according to Ula, that would not be corpse dust. Right, that would not be rekev. We'll say, take a quick look at the Rush again. So the Rush says, Ein rekev ela ba min ha-basar, umin ha-gidu min ha-atzamos, mikulam tzarek sheyeh berekev. In order for something to be called corpse dust, ultimately, again, you have to have literally, again, all of these remains in it. I will say, you ask us, how do you know? How do you know? So we'll say, essentially, what that means is you have to have the remains of an intact body. In other words, when you know that what you're looking at is corpse dust of what was an intact body, you know that within that corpse dust is flesh, bone, and sinews. That's what you know. Fine. So Gemara says, is that really true? That you need everything? So listen to this. Eisvei Rava l'Ula. So Rava raised the kasha to Ula. Rekev haba min ha-basar tahar. If you have corpse dust that just came from flesh, just flesh by itself, ultimately it's tar. They will say, what can you infer from this? Hamina etzem tameh. I could infer from that if corpse dust came from bone, that it would be tameh. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see that corpse dust that's just exclusively from bones is metame, not like ula. I va'afa gavda like a basar, even though there's no flesh on that bone. To which the Gemara says, no. Ema hachi. Rather, you should say as follows: Ema hachi rekev haba min habasar tar. Any corpse dust that comes just from flesh is going to be tar. Ad sheyesh etzem babasar. Until ultimately, again, there's a bone in the flesh as well. So the Bryce is agreeing with Ula, there has to be a bone in the flesh. Haleka gidim. But 1 second, that's fine, but you just set this up as a case where there's a flesh and there's bone. But there are no sinews. To which the Gemara says, it is impossible to have flesh and to have bone and not to have sinews. So therefore, we'll say the Brisa does not shter, the Brisa does not contradict Ula, and we'll say it sounds like over here the Gemara is saying. So we'll say, so now we have two qualifications. Number one, in order for rekev, in order for corpse dust to be metame, ultimately again it has to be pure, unadulterated corpse dust with no other items which decomposed along with the body. That's number one. Number two, the statement of Ula, it's only called rekev if essentially it has a mixture of remains from flesh, bones, and sinews. Flesh, bones, and sinews. Okay, next. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Both a very interesting case. Shnei mesim shekavram zeh im zeh. So I'll say, what happens if you buried two bodies together? Two bodies together. We'll say this did happen, right, at different periods, even now in Eretz Yisrael, by the way. I think I mentioned this before. It's very interesting in Eretz Yisrael. So burial space is at a premium. In fact, again, if you look at what they're doing at Har Menuchos, it's quite incredible. They're essentially making these subterranean tunnels, and they're digging into the side of the earth to go ahead and bury in essentially like the side of the mountain. So in some cemeteries, what they will actually do is, for couples, what they'll do is they'll bury the couple in one grave, and they'll go ahead and they'll dig deep. So they'll put the first spouse who died deeper in, Nowadays, what they do is they put like a layer of cinder block and then earth right in between the two graves. But you have two people buried one on top of the other. So this case is literally where you have two corpses literally buried together. Literally buried together. So it's actually a very interesting shaila here. So now watch this. So Shnei Mesim Shekavim Zemzeh. Let's say you have two corpses that were buried together. So what's the halacha? Ze nasu galgalin lezeh. I should say Zemzeh nasu galgalim zelazeh. They have become galgalim. What I will say now? What's galgalim? So if you take a look at the Rosh, so the Rosh again says. Nasu galgalin zelazeh ba'aruch garas galgalin uperish afar me'urav mimakom acher. So let's say galgalin means a mixture. A mixture. Now what does this mean about say? So let's go back for just a moment. What did we learn on the Braisa on the top of the Daf over here? What did we learn? That in order for corpse dust to convey tumah, what has to happen? It has to be pure, unadulterated corpse dust with nothing else mixed in. Well, here's the problem. Comes along Rav Shmuel Bar Abba, and Rabbi Yochanan, and says, if you have two corpses buried to each other, essentially, each corpse becomes a foreign material for the other. And therefore, again, the remains of these combined two corpses will not go ahead and be metame through corpse dust, through mali tarvad rekem, through a ladle full of corpse dust. Because in other words, each corpse is considered to be a foreign material for the other, and therefore, again, it's considered as if this foreign material mixed into the corpse dust, and therefore it's not metame. Fine, that's the halacha. Massive Rav Nasan. Rav Nasan is the kasha. Rekev habami beis mesim tamei. All right, we'll say it's a pretty explicit statement. When you have corpse dust that comes from two corpses, it's tamei. Pretty explicit. So I'll say, so what do I do with that? Amarava shekavru zebifnei atzma v'zebifnei atzma verkivu v'amad amalei tarvad rekev. Oh, so it's very interesting. So Rava gives a very interesting qualification here. Rava says, if you have two corpses that were buried separately, decomposed separately, and then what? And then you brought a half a ladleful from this corpse and a half a ladleful of corpse dust from this corpse and combine them, they could combine. They will say, why could they combine? Because since they both decomposed individually and took on the status of corpse dust individually, at that point, once they have solidified identity as corpse dust, then they can combine with someone, or I should say, something else. But I will say, but if halacha l'maisa, in the process of decomposition, they're decomposing with each other, then ultimately, again, that compromises the identity. So you hear the distinction? If you bury two bodies with each other, and they decompose together, they will not attain the status of corpse dust. Why? Because each body is considered to be foreign material for the other. And again, the mixture of foreign material into the decomposing corpse dust prevents the corpse dust from conveying tumah. Conversely, if the two bodies decomposed individually, they each became corpse dust on their own, then there is the ability to take half a ladleful from here, corpse A, half a ladleful from corpse B, combine them to form the requisite shear. Very interesting. And the Rush says this explicitly. The Rush explains over here. He says, Sha'achlu ash v'lo nishar b'chol echad kim chatzi tarvad. So I'll say, so again, if you take the half a handful from corpse A, half a handful from corpse B, then they have the ability to form. So we'll say, but if you think about it, it's a kind of Musar Haskell as well. So you know what it's saying is like this. We'll say the whole chap that the Gemara is saying is, it only has the identity of corpse dust if it decomposes individually. And once its identity as corpse dust is solidified, then it could be mixed with other things and still retain its identity. I will say it's the same, it's not just true in death, it's true in life as well. You see, in life, we are exposed to a variety of different things, a variety of exposures and influences. That you can, the only way, we're not supposed to avoid. In other words, we're supposed to be part of the world. We're supposed to be in the world. We're supposed to make a difference in the world. The challenge with that is there are all of these different exposures all around me. And how do I prevent those exposures from imprinting on me? How do I prevent those things from having a negative effect on me? So we'll say, what's the answer? It's incredible. You learn it from Tarvat. Tarvut says that if you decompose individually, you have a solidified identity. So we'll say the yesod in life is, I have to work to make a strong identity for myself. That's my avoda. I have to solidify my values, solidify my hashkafas, reinforce them over and over through Torah, through avoda, through gemilas chasadim, through tefillah. That's what I have to do. Concretize and solidify your identity. So then something amazing happens. If you concretize, or if you solidify and concretize your identity, then you know what happens? Even when you're mixed together with other things, you're still able to retain who and what you are. Right? If two corpses decompose together, neither retains their identity because the identity as Tarvud was never solidified. If they decompose separately, okay, shkoyach, your corpse A, your corpse B. And guess what? Then you have the ability to interact effectively with other influences around you without losing the totality of your identity. I will say it is so important because all of us here, we're all in the world. We're all in the world, and that's a good thing. Hopefully, we're making a difference in our small way in the world, but we are not immune to the negative influences that surround us every single day. And the only way to stay strong is to do exactly like how we start our day every day and continue this throughout the day. Reinforce the identity, solidify identity, concretize identity, and then even when I am, so to speak, mixed with other influences, I still retain my spiritual sense of self. Incredible. All from Tarvud. All from Tarvud. All from Tarvud. Amra Barbachana, Amra Yochanan. So I'll say some interesting other cases. Now that we have the principles, some additional cases. So Amra Barbachana, Amra Yochanan. Gozas Saro, the Kavro Imos. We'll say, now watch this case. You're burying a corpse. You cut hair off the corpse. Don't ask why. Right? But you cut hair off the corpse. You then go ahead and bury the hair together with the corpse. So we'll say, what's the shaila? So what's the shaila? The shaila is detached hair that came from that very corpse considered to be foreign material or not? And I will say, so what's nafkamina? Big nafkamina, right? If it's foreign material, then what? Then the decomposed corpse dust is not metameh. On the other hand, we could say that what? Look, it's this corpse's hair. It was just detached. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? It's not a question, it's a statement. If you go ahead and you cut off hair from the corpse, and then you bury that hair together with the corpse, so we'll say the hair is considered to be like farm material, and therefore again would prevent the corpse dust from being metame. Next, Tanan Hasam, Kol Shebemeis Tameh, any part of a corpse ultimately is Tameh. We'll say Chutz Min Hashinayim Vaser Vatziporen, right? Vatziporen. We'll say the exception of teeth, hair, and nails. Teeth, hair, and nails. Those things do not go ahead and convey Tumas Meis, or B'shas Chiburan Kulan Tamein. But ultimately, again, when they are attached to the corpse, ultimately, they do convey Tumah. Rabbi said, now take a look at the Rush for just a moment, because it's actually very interesting. Kol Shebemeis Tameh, V'av Ha'ar Tameh, Ika Man Da'amar Midrabana. So we'll talk about skin itself in just a moment. Chutz Min HaShinayim V'asir V'atzpar in the Rush, Beperek Tam Anida, Mefarish Taima, Mishum Deba'ino Dumya De'etzem. Rabbi said, it's actually a fascinating drasha. In general, in order for a part of the body to have ongoing tumah, it has to resemble the bones. What's unique about the bones? Ma etzem shenivra imo ve'en gizo machlif, av kol shenivra imo ve'en gizo machlif. So we'll say bones, ultimately again, you are born with them and they do not regenerate. I will say, when he says regenerate is not that a bone can't heal itself. If you were to remove a bone from the body, the bone would not regrow. Right? So therefore, halacha l'maisa, in order for something to become tamei, it has to resemble bone. That's because the pasuk mentions etzem. Just like a bone is a part of the body you're born with and it doesn't regenerate, so to any other part of the body that you're born with that doesn't regenerate conveys tumah. So we'll say, af kol shenivra imo ve'en gizo machlef, yotzu, we'll say, what does this exclude? Hashinayim shol nivro imo, yotzu se'ar v'tziparon sha'af api shenivra imo, gizo machlef. So we'll say it excludes teeth. Why does it exclude teeth? Because you're not born with teeth, right? And when I say it excludes hair and nails, why? Because I will say they regenerate. So just as an aside, so therefore the Gemara says over here that ultimately, again, if you have detached hair, teeth, or nails from a mace, those do not convey tumah by themselves. When they're attached to the mace, they do convey tumah. Detached do not convey. It's really fascinating. So Mar goes weiter. By Chizkiah, Saro ha'omer legaleach, Siporin ha'omer ligzoz mai. So we'll say, what happens if a person dies and they were overdue for a haircut? So it's important to take care of things in a timely manner. Right? So I'll say, so they go ahead, they die and they were due for a haircut. Or they were due to have the manicure, to have their nails cut. So we'll say, so now the mace dies with overgrown hair or overgrown nails. So we'll say, what's the shaila? So the shaila is, do these things have the ability to go ahead and convey tumah? Now what's the shaila we'll say? Mi amrinan kala omi ligazes kigazos dami. So we'll say, one end we could say, there's a concept we'll say that anything that is ready to be removed is halachically as if it has been removed. We'll say, this concept that finds, what's the origin of this concept? This is by karban mincha. We'll say the halacha is by karban mincha. You're supposed to write karban mincha as flour, oil. You're supposed to mix it. What happens if you don't mix it? It's not ma'akev. The karban is still kosher as long as what? It was mixable. This was mixable. It is the concept we just had a few days ago. Kala at the end of last week. Kala roy lebila. In bila ma'akev. As long as it could be mixed, essentially, halachically, it's as if it was mixed. So we'll say, so we use this concept and a lot. So the shaila is over here. The mace dies, and he has overgrown hair and overgrown nails. Now, if he were alive, we'll say, what would have happened? He would have gotten a haircut and his nails cut. So do we say that since it was ready to be, I'll use the word shorn, right? It's as if it was shorn, and therefore these items have the status of hair and nails detached from a mace. Then we'll say, what's the status of hairs and nails detached from the mace? We just said it. It doesn't convey tumah. Or we say, no, presently it is attached to the mace. So mina kala only the gazos ki gazos dami. Ol dilma hashta mia hu mechubar. Or do we say no? At the end of the day, right now, it's attached. And that's what we look at. It's attached right now, and therefore Allah Chalamayis, we treat it as attached to the corpse, and therefore it does convey tumah. V'nifshat leit mit Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. We'll say we can learn this out from Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. What did Rabbi Bar Bar Chana say? We'll say just beforehand. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana was the one who said that Allah Chalamayis, if you went ahead and you cut off hair from the corpse, and then you buried that hair together with the corpse, that's considered to be like what? A foreign material. So the Gemara says, Taima Mishum de Gazas. Now the reason that's true is because you cut the hair off the mace and then buried the hair together with the mace. Ha lo Gazas lo. But you can infer from it that if you did not cut the hair off the mace, even if the hair was ready to be cut itself, halacha l'maisa, that's not called a foreign material. This is what it means to say. Gazas harizel galgalim. What it means to say is like this, that halacha l'maisa, everyone agrees that if you cut off the hair of the mace and then buried that hair with the mace, that's foreign material, and therefore what? Prevents the corpse dust from being metame. So the Gemara says, lo gazaz mi bayale. What's the shaila? The shaila is if you didn't cut the hair, but the hair was clearly overgrown, does that, since it would have been cut, it's ready to be cut, does that represent foreign material mixed in with the corpse or not? So we'll say that's open-ended shaila one. Gemara doesn't resolve it, right? So very long hair, very long nails, corpse is buried that way. Does that represent the inclusion of foreign material, which would then preclude the corpse dust from becoming tamei? Next, Rabbi Yirmiyah, rekev haba mina ekev mahu. So we'll say in the next case, Rabbi Yirmiyah asks, what about corpse dust that comes from the heel? Now we'll say, what is that? So we'll say, this is actually quite fascinating. If you take a look at the Rush, again, in my Rush, it's the first of the intermediate wide lines. Rekev haba mina ekev mahu, lefi sheyesh ba'akavo shel adam ove basar she'ein bo chiyus. So we'll say, listen to this. The heel already has dead skin. Right? So we'll say, especially again, if we've been talking around the open sandals, right? The heel has dead skin. So we'll say, now that dead skin was there already when? From the time the person was alive. So we'll say, here's the interesting shaila. what happens halacha l'maisa? What happens halacha l'maisa if you have rekev from the heel? Mahu ki garmin on rekev haba mikule meis aval da'asi min ekev lo. So I'll say ultimately again, do we say it's only rekev that comes from the corpse in its entirety? But corpse dust that comes from the heel, which essentially was already dead during the lifetime of the person, maybe it's not metame, all dimaloshna, or perhaps I will say perhaps it makes no difference. Perhaps it makes no difference. Others will say, so the fundamental shaila is the din of rekev only on something that died when the person died, or is it okay if the rekev came from something that was already dead when the person was alive and is now when the person was alive, but the person of course is now dead? Others will say, so I want to be clear, no one is suggesting that you could have heel rekev when you're alive. Right? Sounds like a foot condition, right? I'm suffering from heel rekev. I'll say so. That's not what we're suggesting over here, right? What we're talking about over here is a person died, and now there's rekev from the heel. But I know full well that rekev was ultimately that skin on the heel that decomposed was dead during his lifetime. So is rekev dafka a din in something that halacha l'maisa only decomposed after death? Or maybe it was even dead while the person was alive. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Mal, Gerin Rekav, Bikulimes, Avalas Mirekev Lo, Odil Maloshna, Tashma, Taner Binasam Roshia, Rekev Haba Mishne Mason Tame. If you have as we said before, if you have Rekev, if you have corpse dust that comes from two corpses, it's Tame. V'Sagadai Traba Mina Ekev Lo Zil Hacha Dilma Derech Ekev Kasi V'Hacha Dilma Derech Ekev Kasi. So we'll say, we said before that after two corpses decompose individually, they could combine to form the shear of a ladle full of corpse dust. But I understand, inherent in any corpse is the possibility that there's corpse dust from what? From the heel. So obviously we're not concerned about that. So we'll say, you're right. If we're talking about over here an entire corpse that decomposed, you're right. Kigon di'irkiv derech eiver v'ka'asi derech ekev. I will say the shaila over here is that Allah, if you take a look at the last line of the Rush, shadayin lo nirkav sharaguf kima ekev. I will say we're talking about a case where a person's dead, right, and the corpse has not fully decomposed. What has decomposed? The foot, including the heel. So I'll say, so when we're talking about decomposition of an entire corpse, okay, you're right. Whether there's heel dust mixed in there, not mixed in, oh, good, it's tameh. The Shabbat says, what happens if the entire body didn't decompose, but a limb decomposed, and specifically, again, the foot or the heel decomposed, does a handful of heel dust have the ability to convey tumah? To which the Gemara answers, to which the Gemara says, teku. I will say, I want to, all right, if we have time, which we won't, but I will say, there's an incredible piece on this, okay, but if we do it, we're for sure not finishing the daf. So I will say, it's got a little bit weiter, but just remind me, safnas paneach on heel dust, not the safnas paneach, not the luggage of her. This is Rabbi Yosef HaKohen, who was the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, died in the late 1700s. He has an incredible piece on this, but again, will remind me, we'll come back to it. Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Ubar b'may isha havi gilgalim o lo. But it's another interesting case. Let's say, Rahman a woman who's pregnant passes away. So she dies, and she's pregnant. So there's a fetus inside of her. So we'll say, here's the shaila. Is the fetus considered to be foreign material inside of her body, and therefore again prevents her corpse dust over time from becoming tameh? The Gemara says, "Kevan damar mar uber yarech imo hilchak gufahu." So on one end we can say, look, that a fetus is considered to be an extension of the mother. Right? We'll say that's lashon. Uber yarech imo literally means a baby is like the thigh of the mother. It's a part of the body, and therefore again it's not foreign material. O dilma kevan ditzofo lotzeis mifrash parash minei. Or do we say, no, that since ultimately, again, had the mother not passed away, the baby would have exited her body, therefore the baby is reckoned as a separate, independent entity, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, it is considered to be foreign material, and would prevent the corpse from becoming tameh. Vimtim salamar ubar d'sofa lates mifrash parish, and if you go with the idea that ultimately, again, a fetus would be considered to be foreign material in the body of the mother. I will say Amud Beis, Shichvas Zera b'may Isha Mahu. I will say, what happens if a woman passed away and she was married? So I will say it's possible that before she passed away, she had relations with her husband, which could mean that again, there's Shichvas Zera, there is semen in her body. So I will say, what does that do? Does that represent the presence of foreign material, which would then prevent her corpse dust from becoming tamei? Ma'u mi'amrinan kevadol itzar kigufa dami. Do we say, since at the end of the day that zera, that semen, did not become a baby, therefore Allah Lamaisa again is considered to be part of her body? O dilma kevan dina alma ka'asilo. Or maybe we should say no, that since that material is from outside of her body, right, that then comes into her body, ultimately that is considered to be foreign material mixed in, and would therefore compromise her corpse dust. So I'll say, good. So another shayla. Boira papa. Pirsha mahu. So I'll say, this is very interesting. What happens, I'll say, if she passes away, when she passes away, there is pirsha. I'll say, pirsha is excrement. What it's saying is, there's excrement in her body that she has not yet excreted. So I'll say, so what's the status of that? Kevan. So obviously excrement comes from a processing of food. She can't live without food. Therefore, Allah might say any excrement that is still in the body at the time of death is considered to be part of the body. We say no, since the excrement comes from food, and food is something external, therefore the presence of excrement in her body ultimately precludes her corpse dust from becoming tamei. So I'll say one more. Bayrav Acha Braid Rav Ika. Oro Mahu. We'll say, what about skin? I will say, so I just want to make an interesting distinction over here. There's things between skin and flesh. Right? When the Gemara talks about Basar Hameis, the Gemara is literally talking about the flesh that is underneath the external layer of skin. So we'll say there's a whole discussion, this is what the Rosh referenced before, about whether or not skin itself, skin by itself, is ultimately conveys tumah. Oramahu. So I'll say, so what about the skin of the mace? Does the skin of the mace represent foreign material? I'll say, by the way, it makes sense now. Why? Because skin, unlike bone, right? What happens with skin, right? So even though you're born with it, but it regenerates. It regenerates. So therefore, again, it really falls into the hair, tooth, and nail category. So what about skin? So by Rafuna Bar Manoach, Kicho v'neo ma'u. What happens if a person passes away, and inside of the body is saliva and mucus? So the presence of those items represent foreign materials, which would then preclude the corpse from becoming tamei. Sheba say, this is great. Listen to this. So I'll say, so all these are unresolved questions. So Shmuel Bar Acha says, I don't understand. I will say, let's say we assume that the answer to all of the above questions is they are considered to be foreign materials. Rekev dimitame hechan mishkachasla. I will say, when will you ever have a case of corpse dust that's mitame? I will say, think about this just a moment, right? Because if you answer affirmative to all the previous questions, so I will say, so therefore again, the presence of mucus, the presence of saliva, the presence of excrement, the presence of skin, the presence of semen, the presence of all these things are foreign materials, and therefore again they compromise the ability of the corpse dust to become tamei. So I will say, who dies without one of these things? I was going to say, mucus, saliva. So I don't understand. So how can you ever have a case of regular? So also, that's very interesting. So the Gemara says, you could have it. I'll tell you how. Before the person died, the ashkiye meidikalim, you gave him, we'll say, to drink meidikalim. Meidikalim is it's a laxative. It's a laxative. So I'll say, give him a laxative. So therefore, again, nothing left in the body. Nothing left in the body. Okay. The sachye nasha, you go and use it depilatory. So therefore, we'll say again, no hair. The shalku b'meiteria. And after the person passed away, literally again, you put the body in the boiling waters of Teria, which boils off the skin. Okay, so if you have all of these criteria together, ultimately, again, that could be a case of record. Now, we'll say, now I want to point out, we're not suggesting A, you should do this, right? And B, that this is the answer to our questions. Remember, we have not answered the previous questions. Those are all open-ended. What the Gemara was just saying is, if indeed you hold that halacha l'maisa, all of these things ultimately, again, are considered to be additives, so to speak, to the corpse dust, then how do you ever have a course of corpse dust? But again, that presupposes that we answer all of these questions in the affirmative, which we have not yet done. Let's go back to Rabbi. Naktinon, meis shetachna in lo rakev. Rabbi says, we've learned that if you take a corpse and you grind it up, there is no corpse dust. Or in other words, Rabbi say, the din of corpse dust is only in a body that has decomposed naturally. But if you go ahead and you grind the body up, ultimately, again, there is no din of corpse dust. We'll say, what happens if halacha l'maisi you ground it up, but then the body did decompose afterwards? In other words, the ground up remains were then left to rot. So we'll say, do we say, listen, the din of decomposition is a decomposition of the flesh, the sinews and the bones. And even though it's ground up, you still have that here. Or no, maybe in order for corpse dust to be a problem, you need the body to decompose in accordance with the way it is created, and that is lacking here. To which the Gemara says, Teiku. All right, we're just going to have to leave that question. Let's say a little bit later. Tani Ula Bar Chanina. Meis Shechasralo in Lo Rakev. So I'll say a very interesting case. If you have a body that is deficient, and what happens? Halacha l'maisa, again, the body that's deficient, in lo rakev. So we'll say, number one, there is no din of corpse dust. It's very important. So corpse dust is a din, halacha l'maisa, in a body which is complete. Furthermore, v'lo tefusa, v'lo shchunas kavara. So we'll say, let's analyze this. We'll end up stopping somewhere closer. We're supposed to listen to this. Tfusa is the halacha that says like this. I'm going to quote you from the Rosh. The Rosh says the common parak beis. He says mibeir says damafana hameis mikivro tzarach v'nitol tefusaso imo kimo etzbaos mikarka b'zusamis. We'll say halacha l'maisa. If you have to move a grave, so when you move a body, so we'll say when you move a body, you have to take the body, all of the loose earth around it, and what we'll call virgin soil, up to a depth of 3 finger breadths around it as well. That's the halacha of tfusa. What are we concerned about? We're concerned about scattered remains. Right? That's what we're concerned. Therefore, against halacha ma'isa, all loose earth, and again, 3 finger breadths of virgin soil around. That's called tfusa. And ultimately, shchunas kvaras rabosai is the halacha that says that if you find 3 corpses within Dalit amos of each other, then ultimately, again, you have to treat that, I will say, as a neighborhood of graves, or colloquially stated, a cemetery. And therefore, I will say, halacha l'maisa, what you have to do is you have a halachic obligation to check for other graves in the vicinity up to a distance of 20 amos. Again, the Rosh has a whole lot of richos on this. So the Gemara saying over is like this. Then halacha l'maisa, if you go ahead and you have a body that is deficient, so number one, there's no din of rakev, no din of corpse dust. Number two, there's no din of tfusa, which means if you move that body, you do not have to take the loose soil, nor do you have to take the soil at 3 finger breadths. And number 3, if you find a body like that, a deficient body in proximity to 2 other bodies, it does not create a concern about a cemetery that you have to check out. So the Gemara says, Verova, Omali Tarvat. All right, so we'll stop over here. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up a Hashem with the statement tomorrow. We'll say, Incredible Gemara.